The moment I saw my wife standing in the cereal aisle, holding a box of Raisin Bran like it contained the meaning of life, I knew something was wrong. Melissa was not a Raisin Bran kind of woman. For as long as I'd known her, she had an unwavering commitment to Frosted Flakes. She had opinions about them, serious ones. Something about the balance of crunch and sugar, the way they didn't get soggy too fast but also didn't feel like eating plywood. She had once ranted for a full 10 minutes about how some cheap off-brand flakes had personally betrayed her. So, when I walked into the grocery store on a random Wednesday night and saw her holding Raisin Bran with this weird, contemplative look on her face, my brain short-circuited. "Trying to reinvent yourself?" I asked, stepping beside her. She jumped slightly, like she hadn't heard me approach. Another red flag. Melissa had the reflexes of a cat and the paranoia of someone who had been burned by a surprise birthday party gone wrong. "Oh. Hey. What are you doing here?" She turned, gripping the box like I had caught her in some scandalous act. I glanced down at my basket. I ran out of coffee. And self-respect. Figured I'd restock both. She laughed, but it was too quick, too bright. I just felt like trying something new. Something new? After 15 years of a monogamous relationship with Frosted Flakes? I gestured toward the box. "Melissa, this is a crisis." She rolled her eyes but still didn't put the box in the cart. Just held it there, hovering between decision and regret. And that's when I saw it. Her nails. Red. Melissa never wore red nail polish. Not because she didn't like it, but because she had a very specific theory about how it made her hands look like they belonged to an old-school soap opera villain. She had called it the Cruella de Vil effect. So why were her nails red now? I was about to ask when she abruptly shoved the Raisin Bran back onto the shelf and grabbed a random box of Cheerios. "You know what? Never mind. I'm being ridiculous." "You're right." I watched as she tossed them into her cart and started walking toward the checkout line like the store was on fire. I should have let it go. I should have just assumed that my wife was having some sort of midlife cereal crisis and moved on with my day. But something about that interaction gnawed at me. Melissa was a creature of habit. Predictable, but in a way that felt comforting. Her routines were a foundation. A constant. And now, suddenly, she was switching cereals and painting her nails like she was about to star in an episode of Real Housewives, Midwestern edition? Something was up. And then came the next thing. The thing that made my stomach turn in a way Raisin Bran never could. 3 days later, while grabbing the mail, I saw an envelope on our kitchen counter. It was addressed to Melissa, but there was no return address. Just a neat little B scribbled in the corner. That alone wasn't weird. Melissa got mail all the time. But it was the way she reacted when she saw me holding it. She froze. Actually froze. Like someone had just paused her with a remote. Then, in one fluid motion, she snatched it from my hands, crumpled it slightly, and shoved it into her purse. I blinked. What was that? Nothing. Nothing? You just snatched that envelope like it was a ransom note. She forced a laugh. It's a surprise. For you. I don't want you to see it yet. Right. Because nothing says romantic surprise like a cryptic envelope with a single letter on it. Melissa was already walking away, disappearing into the bathroom, purse in tow. And that was when I knew for sure. This was not about Raisin Bran. This was something bigger. Now, I'd like to say that I handled this situation with dignity. That I sat down like a rational adult and waited for her to confess whatever was going on. But I didn't. Because I'm Brian Collins, and my specialty is making bad decisions in the name of curiosity. So that night, while she was asleep, I checked the trash. And there it was. The envelope. Torn in half, but still readable. A hotel reservation. Under Brian's name. Only, I hadn't booked it. It's incredible how quickly a man can go from "my wife is acting a little weird" to "my wife is cheating on me with someone named Brian who is not me." I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the torn hotel reservation like it was some kind of optical illusion. Maybe I was reading it wrong. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for why my name was on a reservation I hadn't made. Maybe. No. No, I wasn't going to do that thing. That ridiculous, self-deluding thing where I convinced myself that this was all just a big misunderstanding. That would be the old Brian. The Brian who ignored the fact that Melissa suddenly had a gym membership but never seemed to actually go to the gym. The Brian who overlooked the fact that she had started wearing sunglasses inside, like she was avoiding recognition. This Brian? This Brian was done pretending. So, I did what any man in my position would do. I spent the next 2 hours finding the absolute dumbest way possible to handle the situation. Step 1, I Googled the hotel. It was one of those fancy boutique places downtown. The kind where they give you free fruit water in the lobby and act like that makes up for charging you a week's salary per night. Step 2, I called the front desk and, in what I can only describe as an award-worthy performance, convinced them that I was a very confused guest who had lost track of his reservation. "Oh, of course, Mr. Collins," the woman at the front desk said cheerfully. "You're all set for the executive suite this Saturday evening. Will you be needing any special accommodations?" I paused. "Yeah, actually. Do you guys offer a service where you slap some sense into your guests before they do something stupid?" Silence. She said awkwardly, "We have a spa?" "Close enough." I hung up. So, now I had a date, a location, and a rapidly declining sense of self-respect. Saturday. Executive suite. Someone using my name to book it. Melissa had been acting weird for months, but I had let things slide because I liked my life the way it was. I liked my routines, my house, my marriage. But apparently, my marriage had decided to sign up for an alternate reality where I was the kind of guy who booked fancy hotel suites and forgot about it. And that left one question: who was the other Brian? Because let's be clear, there was no way Melissa had accidentally put my name on that reservation. She wasn't the type to mix things up. If anything, she was terrifyingly organized. If I asked her right now where our 2017 tax returns were, she could produce them in under 20 seconds. So this wasn't some oops, I accidentally put my husband's name down while booking a suite for my secret lover situation. Which meant one thing. Whoever she was meeting, she was using my name on purpose. And that was a whole new level of unsettling. Saturday rolled around, and I did something Melissa never expected. I showed up. Now, I'd like to tell you I had a well-thought-out plan, that I had spent the last couple of days crafting a brilliant, foolproof strategy. But really, all I had was a hotel address, a wrinkled button-up shirt, and a desperate need to understand how I had ended up in this mess. Walking into that lobby felt like stepping into someone else's life. The whole place smelled expensive, the kind of expensive that makes you feel like you need to apologize just for existing. I half expected the concierge to take one look at me and say, "Sir, we don't allow broke husbands in here." Instead, a too friendly guy behind the desk smiled and said, "Welcome back, Mr. Collins. Your suite is ready." Oh, this was worse than I thought. Because that meant this wasn't the first time someone using my name had been here. I barely managed a nod before heading to the elevators. My heart was pounding, but not in the cool, action movie way. More in the about to find out my wife has a secret life kind of way. I reached the floor. The suite number was easy to find. And then I knocked. I didn't even know why. It wasn't like I needed permission to enter a room booked under my own name. But some part of me, some ridiculous part of me, still wanted to give Melissa the benefit of the doubt. The door swung open. And there he was. Brian. Not me, Brian. A completely different, entirely real, and unfortunately good-looking Brian. And the worst part? He looked just as surprised to see me as I was to see him. The other Brian, because that's what I was calling him now, blinked at me like I was an unexpected package from an online order he didn't remember placing. "Ah," he said. It was a solid start, really. Nothing like a little incoherent panic to set the mood. I took a second to size him up. He was about my height, maybe a few pounds heavier, and he had that kind of face that suggested he spent an inappropriate amount of money on skincare. His hair was too perfect, his shirt was too crisp, and the way he hesitated at the door told me one very important thing: he was waiting for someone else to show up, and that someone wasn't me. Which meant I had officially crashed my own wife's secret rendezvous. Beautiful. Let me guess, I said, leaning against the doorframe. You're Brian. His mouth opened, then closed again. His brain was trying to catch up, but I had the advantage here. I'd had 2 days to prepare for this disaster, and he'd had all of 4 seconds. Who are you? He finally managed. That's a great question, Brian. I clapped him on the shoulder, maybe a little too hard. I'm Brian. The original Brian, if you will. The factory model. And I have to say, I'm a little confused about why there appears to be a second one of me standing in this very expensive hotel room. His face did something interesting then, somewhere between a grimace and a poorly executed poker face. Wait, he said, exhaling. Melissa's husband? Oh, fantastic, I said. So you do know who I am. That saves us some time. He ran a hand through his hair, the universal sign of a man who was about to say something deeply stupid. Look, man, he started, which was never a good beginning. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Oh, I'm sure there has. I nodded. I just haven't quite decided whether I'm the one misunderstanding, or if it's the guy standing in a hotel room booked under my name who's a little confused. He let out an awkward chuckle, which was a mistake, because I smiled at him in the way you smile at someone right before ruining their entire day. Tell you what, Brian, I said. Why don't you go ahead and explain this situation to me? And make sure it's a good story, because I have so many questions, and I'd really hate for your answers to be disappointing. He hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Then, just as he opened his mouth, we both heard it. The sound of heels clicking down the hallway. Melissa. I turned back to Brian 2.0, raising a brow. This is about to get interesting, isn't it? He groaned. The door wasn't even all the way closed before Melissa walked in, phone in hand, muttering something under her breath. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy tapping away on her screen, probably texting the other Brian that she was on her way, completely unaware that he had already met the original Brian, who was now standing 5 feet away with a front row seat to whatever ridiculous explanation was about to unfold. I didn't say anything. I just waited. And then, finally, she looked up. Her reaction was beautiful. A full-body freeze, her fingers still hovering over her phone screen like she could somehow rewind time if she just tapped hard enough. Her expression went through several stages: confusion, realization, denial, and finally, the one I was waiting for. Panic. Brian, she choked out, staring at me like I was a ghost. Hey, honey, I said, cheerful as ever. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd drop by and see what you've been up to. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She turned to Brian 2.0, like maybe he had some kind of escape plan she could borrow, but he just looked like he wanted to disappear. I stepped further into the room, glancing around. Nice place. Must have set you back a bit. Oh wait, silly me, I'm the one who apparently paid for it. Melissa found her voice. This isn't. Oh, no rush, I said, holding up a hand. Take your time. Really, I can't wait to hear how you're going to explain this one. Because right now, it really looks like my wife booked a hotel suite under my name for some guy who, frankly, isn't nearly as good looking as I expected. Brian 2.0 sighed. Okay, look. Melissa snapped toward him. Shut up, Brian. That's great, I said. Really clears things up. Which Brian, by the way? Feels like an important distinction right now. She turned back to me, probably to say something that would make me regret ever speaking, but I was already past the point of caring. Melissa, I said, why don't you just be honest with me? Because I gotta tell you, I'm struggling to come up with a reasonable explanation for this. But maybe you have one that doesn't make me want to jump out this window. She pressed her lips together, probably debating between two equally terrible excuses, when Brian 2.0 sighed again. "Alright, screw it," he muttered. "This is a disaster anyway." Melissa snapped toward him again, eyes wide. "Brian." "No, you know what," he said. "I'm tired of this. I didn't sign up for this level of stupid." I crossed my arms. "Oh, please. Keep going." He exhaled, looked between the two of us, and then dropped the bomb. "She told me her husband was into this kind of thing." Silence. Actual, painful silence. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Melissa buried her face in her hands. "Oh my God, Brian, shut up." Brian 2.0 threw up his hands. "She said you were one of those guys who liked it. That you got off on this stuff, that you." "Okay." Melissa practically lunged at him. "We don't need to discuss that." I held up a single finger. 1 second. I turned to my wife, who now looked like she was contemplating whether she could fake her own death before this conversation continued. "Melissa," I said, my voice so calm it was almost frightening. "Are you telling me that you, my wife, convinced some guy to sleep with you by telling him that I was cool with it?" She clenched her jaw. "Brian." That wasn't a yes or a no, Melissa. She let out a breath through her nose. Let me be absolutely sure we're on the same page here," I interrupted, pacing the room. "Not only have you been lying, cheating, and using my name for whatever bizarre reasons only you can understand, but you also dragged me into it by telling some guy I approved?" Brian 2.0, apparently sensing the way the air in the room was shifting, took a slow step back. Melissa swallowed. "It's not like that." "Oh, then please, enlighten me," I said. "What is it like, exactly?" She didn't answer. Which, frankly, was answer enough. Brian 2.0 looked like he regretted every life choice that had led him to this moment. Melissa looked like she wanted to crawl into the minibar and stay there forever. And me? I was standing in the middle of a hotel suite that I had apparently booked for my wife and her side project, trying to decide which part of this situation was the dumbest. "Alright," I said, clapping my hands together. "Let's unpack this, shall we?" Melissa groaned. "Brian, can we?" I pointed at her. "Nope. You've had your turn." I turned to Brian 2.0. "Let's start with you, since you're the guest of honor. How exactly did Melissa pitch this little arrangement to you?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "She told me you were, into it." "Into what?" I asked, tilting my head. Brian 2.0 gave me an uncomfortable glance, then Melissa, then back to me. "You know. Watching. The whole, sharing thing." I nodded slowly, as if I were processing a fascinating scientific discovery. "Right. So just to clarify, my wife convinced you that I was not only aware of this little rendezvous but actively rooting for it?" "That's what she said." "Interesting." I folded my arms. "And that made sense to you?" He hesitated. "Like, when she told you this," I continued, "you didn't stop for even 1 second and think, that's weird, maybe I should double check with the husband before I start pretending I'm him at a hotel?" Brian 2.0 groaned. "Look, I realize now that No, I really want to understand your thought process here," I cut him off. "Melissa gives you some half-baked story about her husband being all for it, and your immediate reaction is, yeah, this seems legit, let's do it? Not even a quick email? Hey, Brian, just making sure you're cool with this before I take your wife to a hotel?" He shifted uncomfortably. She was very convincing. I turned to Melissa. "Wow. You hear that? Very convincing. You should consider a career in politics." Melissa pinched the bridge of her nose. "Brian. Hey, you wanted to be creative with your lies. Now you get to deal with the results." She sighed, then turned to Brian 2.0. "Can you please leave?" I waved at the door. "Yeah, Brian. Why don't you head out?" You've done enough damage for one evening. Brian 2.0 didn't need to be told twice. He practically bolted for the door, muttering something about never doing this again, and what the hell was I thinking? The second he was gone, the room fell into complete silence. Melissa and I stared at each other. So, I said. That was interesting. She exhaled. Brian. No, I interrupted. I just want to appreciate this moment. Because I'll be honest, out of all the ways I imagined finding out my wife was cheating, this was not on the list. She crossed her arms. I was going to tell you. I blinked. Melissa, I literally caught you in the middle of a hotel meetup. When exactly were you planning on telling me? Before or after I started getting Christmas cards from you and Brian 2.0? She groaned. You don't understand. Oh, trust me, I understand plenty. I gestured around the room. I understand that my wife, for some reason I cannot even begin to comprehend, thought the best way to cheat was to pretend I was in on it. She didn't say anything. And let's talk about that for a second, I continued, stepping closer. Because I really need to understand why you thought that was the winning strategy here. She shifted awkwardly. I don't know, Brian. I panicked. I let out a short laugh. Oh, you panicked. Right. You panicked, so naturally, you told your boyfriend that I was totally fine with you sneaking around behind my back. She ran a hand through her hair. It wasn't like that. Then explain it to me, Melissa, I said, crossing my arms. Because from where I'm standing, it really looks like you've spent the last however many months running a one-woman scam on both me and whatever poor fool you dragged into this. Melissa didn't respond. I waited. And then, finally, she sighed. I didn't want you to find out. Oh, well, that's reassuring. She shot me an irritated look. I mean, I didn't want to hurt you. I thought. I don't know. Maybe if I made it seem like you were okay with it, I wouldn't feel as guilty. I stared at her. Melissa, that is quite possibly the worst logic I have ever heard. She threw up her hands. I panicked. You keep saying that like it's a reasonable excuse. We stood there, the absurdity of the entire situation hanging in the air. And then, finally, I let out a breath. So, what now? She hesitated. What do you mean? I gestured between us. What happens next? Because I've got to be honest, Melissa, I don't really see a great path forward here. Her expression faltered for the first time. Brian. No, seriously, I said. Let's break it down. Do you actually expect me to go home with you after this? Like, we just pretend this whole thing was some weird misunderstanding? That we laugh about it over breakfast tomorrow? She swallowed. I don't know. Well, let me help you out, I said. That's not happening. Her face tightened. So what? That's it? I shrugged. You tell me, Melissa. What's your plan? She didn't have one. That much was clear. For all her ridiculous maneuvering, for all the lies and excuses, she had never actually thought about the part where she got caught. And now, standing in the middle of a hotel room booked under my name, she was realizing that. I shook my head. You know what? I'm done. This is exhausting. She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I turned, walked to the door, and left. Because frankly, I had better things to do. Walking out of that hotel felt great. Not in a victorious way, not in some cinematic, slow-motion strut kind of way, more like stepping out of a sauna you didn't realize was slowly suffocating you. I had spent the last several months feeling like something was off, second-guessing myself, ignoring red flags because I didn't want to believe what was right in front of me. And now there was no question. Melissa was exactly what I didn't want her to be. And here's the funny part. I wasn't even sad. I should have been, right? My wife, my marriage, my whole life, just gone. But no. Standing there outside that overpriced hotel, I felt awake for the first time in a long time. Because now, I had a job to do. Melissa and Brian 2.0 had played their little game, lied to my face, used my own name to cover up their garbage affair. That took a special kind of arrogance. The kind that deserved something equally special in return. So, I got to work. Step 1: Information. Melissa had no idea that I had access to our shared cloud account. I don't think she even remembered setting it up, honestly. But I did. And because of that, I now had access to everything. Deleted messages, old call logs, even some particularly stupid selfies she and Brian 2.0 had taken at a bowling alley, of all places. Nothing says illicit affair like throwing on some rented shoes and sharing a lane with a guy who willingly goes by Brian. Step 2: Leverage. See, what Melissa had forgotten in her quest to live out whatever ridiculous secret life she had imagined for herself was that I wasn't just her husband, I was also the person who handled all the important things in our life. Bills? In my name. The house? Bought with my credit. Our car? Registered under me. That hotel she had used for her little meetups? Paid for with my card. And then there was Brian 2.0. Oh, I did some digging on him too. Turns out, he had a lot more to lose than I did. He wasn't just some random guy Melissa had picked up, he was married. Very married. With a wife and kids. Oh, and here's the kicker. His wife? Lawyer. A divorce lawyer. You couldn't make this up if you tried. Step 3: Execution. I started small. A few anonymous emails. One to Melissa's boss, detailing how she had been borrowing company resources for her little personal vacations, complete with some very interesting credit card statements. Another to Brian 2.0's wife, politely informing her of what her loving husband had been up to on company time. Then, for the grand finale, I made a phone call to the bank. Hey, this is Brian Collins. Yeah, I need to report some fraudulent charges on my card. There have been a series of hotel bookings I definitely didn't authorize. Aha. Yeah, I'd like to dispute all of them. Within an hour, Melissa's little hideaway spots had all been flagged for fraud, the charges reversed, and her precious Brian 2.0 was about to get a very unpleasant call from management. Oh, and the house? The one she was still comfortably living in? The one she thought she'd be staying in while we figured things out? Yeah. No. That house was mine. Legally. And within 24 hours, so was a notice of eviction. The best part? She never saw it coming. I got a text from her 2 days later, full of confusion and just the tiniest hint of desperation. Melissa, Brian, what the hell is going on? My work just put me on probation, I'm locked out of the bank account, and there's a letter saying I have to leave the house? I stared at the message for a while, enjoying the moment. Then, finally, I typed back. Me, oh, honey. I thought you liked surprises. Melissa tried calling me. 5 times, back to back. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Because here's the thing, Melissa never called. She was a texter. Even in an emergency, she would send at least 3 messages before resorting to an actual phone call. So, if she was calling, it meant she was officially out of ways to manipulate the situation. Which was great for me. I let the phone ring. I let it ring again. And then, after the 6th attempt, I finally picked up. Melissa, I said, my voice as calm as if she had just asked me to pick up some milk on the way home. What the hell is happening, Brian? Her voice was frantic, the kind of tone people get when they realize they've stepped on a landmine and are about to learn how bad the explosion is. Oh, I don't know, I said. You tell me. What exactly is happening? She let out an exasperated noise. My job put me on probation. My bank account is frozen. And I just got a call from a lawyer, Brian 2.0's wife, saying she knows everything and is filing for divorce. Do you have anything to do with this? Wow, I said. That all sounds terrible. But hey, you know what they say, bad things come in threes. Or, in your case, dozens. Brian, she snapped, her voice shaking. Are you serious? You did this? Well, let's see, I said. Did I personally cheat on my spouse? No. Did I lie about it for months? Also no. Did I involve my spouse's own name in my incredibly stupid plan? Again, no. What I did do, Melissa, was simply connect the dots and let the universe take care of the rest. She made a choked noise. You ruined my life. I laughed. Melissa, I barely had to do anything. You did that all by yourself. I have nothing now, Brian. Do you even realize what you've done? Oh, I realize, I said, enjoying the absolute meltdown happening in real time. Because for the first time in a long time, I actually have peace and quiet. And you, Melissa? You have exactly what you deserve. She went silent for a few seconds. Then, in a lower voice, she tried one last move, the pathetic one. Brian, can we just talk? We are talking. No, I mean, really talk. In person. I just need to see you. Please. I smirked, because I knew exactly what she was doing. She thought she could pull one last guilt trip, maybe convince me that somehow I was being unreasonable. And the best part? I wasn't even tempted to fall for it. Yeah, that's gonna be a no from me, I said. Melissa, let's be honest, if we meet up, all that's going to happen is you trying to gaslight me into believing you're the victim here. And honestly? I don't have the energy for that kind of stupidity. So that's it, she asked, her voice shaking. You're just walking away? I shrugged, even though she couldn't see me. Walking? No. Running? Maybe. She inhaled sharply like she was about to yell at me, but I had already decided I was done. Anyway, I said, this has been fun, but I have better things to do with my life. Best of luck, though. I hear unemployment is thriving these days. And then, without waiting for her response, I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt good. Because for once, I had done exactly what I needed to do: cut out the nonsense, reclaim my sanity, and leave Melissa to clean up her own mess. And let me tell you, nothing has ever felt better. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and rate the story in the comments.